was recently exploring the Ozark Mountains in northern Arkansas in my truck. While this was great and it took me to off the beaten path locations via some pretty rough 4x4 trails, I wanted to explore a little deeper into the forest. I had found a hiking trail that didn't look overly used and decided it was a great place to see some less disturbed natural beauty. I got out my trusty backpack, loaded it with food and supplies for a few days' worth of adventure, and set out. I had very little knowledge of the area and no real agenda other than to explore a bit and see what I could find. The trail soon led me to a rock cliff overlooking a beautiful valley. I had gotten a late start, so this would be where I camped for the night. I started setting up my camp by a small stream that I found about a half-mile from the rock ledge. I found a couple of trees that were perfect for rigging up my hammock. I often sleep in the hammock instead of a tent when I'm in the woods. As night fell and darkness engulfed the forest, I set about preparing some dinner. Once I was fed and everything was put away, I decided to kick back in the hammock and read for a bit before going to sleep. As is always the case, the forest comes alive at night with the sounds of creatures scurrying through the underbrush. I usually find it very relaxing, but something sounded off. Something about the cadence of footsteps. It sounded more bipedal than normal animal noises. When I tried to listen more closely, though, everything sounded normal. Soon enough, I was drifting off to sleep. Rest was a bit fitful that night, as I had nightmares that someone or something was standing over my hammock with one arm raised high as if they were about to strike me with something. Of course, when morning came, I was fine. My camp was undisturbed, the birds were singing, the sun was shining. I soon had hot coffee in my cup, and order was restored to the world, and the dreams were all but forgotten. Once my camp was packed away, I headed down the trail going deeper and deeper into the forest. Soon my route looked more like a game trail than a hiking path. This area was certainly not a tourist destination. Not far down the trail, I spotted a large rock outcropping. As I made my way around it, I saw the entrance to a shallow cave. There were definitely signs of people camping in the cave. I can't say I blame them either. It was a perfect shelter. It was difficult to say how recently the cave had been used, though. As I moved on further down the trail, I noticed the lack of forest sounds. That always creeps me out. Typically, if you listen, the forest is full of sounds, birds chirping, squirrels skittering about, leaves rustling. There was none of that here. After a few hundred yards, everything was back to normal. I tend to think that nature has learned to avoid places with bad juju, and I try to follow her lead. An hour or two later, I found a great spot to camp. There was a small clearing beside a beautiful turquoise stream. I strapped up my hammock, set up my little stove, and began boiling some water for a freeze-dried dinner of Cajun shrimp and rice. Emphasis on the Cajun part. She had some heat to it. I cleaned up my dinner mess. You should never leave any food remnants near your camp overnight, unless you want a dingo or two to show up. Anyway, it was late, I was tired, my belly was full, and my cozy hammock was calling my name. Sleep came quickly, and I slept like a brick. But just before sunrise, the previous night's terror-filled dream returned. There I was, sleeping away in my hammock. I opened my eyes to once again see an undistinguishable figure standing over me, about to swing an arm down at me. And then I woke up with a start. I almost fell out of the hammock this time. I decided then and there no more spicy food before bed on the trail. Now I know it's not reasonable, but having such a similar nightmare 2 nights in a row was all it took to tell me it's time to do an about face and head back up towards my truck. While the water was boiling for some morning coffee, I packed up camp. A cup of joe and a Nature Valley bar down the hatch, and I was hoofing it back out the way I came. Since I was no longer exploring and being a looky-loo, I was making some pretty good time. Soon enough, I was back at the little cave. Once again, things got eerily quiet. As I passed the cave entrance, I noticed something was different. The fire ring was wet, like someone had recently doused a fire. Did someone camp there last night? Okay, my overactive mind kicked into gear and dreamed up all kinds of craziness. I mean, at this point, I was pretty sure someone else was out there. I still had at least one more night to spend in these woods, and that's rushing it. Okay, enough of that. I pushed all those crazy true crime thoughts out of my head. I focused on moving down the trail towards my truck. In order to get the most distance between me and the cave, I hiked right to the edge of darkness. I normally hate setting up camp after dark, but I considered this to be abnormal circumstances. I found a spot just off the trail a ways and set up my hammock, ate a couple of granola bars, and went to sleep. For the third night in a row, I had the same nightmare. I'm sleeping peacefully in my hammock, opened my eyes to see a dark figure standing over me with an arm raised high in the air. Only this time, I see something in their hand just as it begins to swing down. A slight glimmer of a blade like that of a K-bar knife. Instinctively, I raise my hand to cover my face when I feel the blade hit the line supporting my hammock. Suddenly, I wake up just as my hammock crashes to the ground. Dazed, I look around but I don't see anybody or anything. As I scramble to my feet, I glance over to the strap that once held my hammock up. No doubt about it, it had been cut. I grabbed my pack and took off down the trail, headed for the safety of my truck. I got to the truck, tossed the pack in the back, hopped in, and took off. Once I was a mile or so away, I pulled over to calm down. Only then did I realize I had just left my hammock in the woods. Nope, no way was I going back to retrieve it. I'm sorry, folks, for littering like that, but not sorry enough to go back. Once I calmed down, had some breakfast, I thought about what had happened. Maybe my imagination got the best of me. I mean, no way did my imagination cut that strap, but maybe some rodent or something chewed through it. Maybe it was almost broke and it finally gave way. Maybe someone or something visited my camp 3 nights in a row and cut the strap on the third night. What do you think?